Nunes did announce that the first hearing on Russian interference in the election will be held March 20th. And Lane, we also heard today from President Trump's nominee to be Attorney General. That is Rod Rosenstein. And he said he has no reason to believe at this point that there's been any wiretapping.
Well, Margaret, as you pointed out, Chairman Nunes distanced himself from the president's claims, and he's called on several officials to testify later this month, including FBI Director Comey, NSA Director Rogers, former CIA Director Brennan. Do we have a sense of what's expected to come from that testimony?
Well, that testimony and that March 20th date is all aimed at this broader probe into Russian interference in the election. And the White House, in trying to make sense of these series of tweets that the president posted, but the White House says they will not substantiate in terms of providing information, have tried to say, well, let's tack that on to this March 20th hearing and add in this question of whether President Obama perhaps ordered or sanctioned some sort of surveillance of Donald Trump during the campaign itself. So that hearing, you will no doubt have questions posed by Democrats, certainly to all the former heads of the agencies and the sitting FBI chief, to say, did any of you do this? In which case, was this truly without warrant, i.e. illegal? Which is something that the FBI director has not publicly said, but reporting has shown he has suggested the Justice Department should push back on. Or was this in any way substantiated with a warrant, which would mean that President Trump was somehow swept up in a broader probe into counterintelligence, which in and of itself would suggest there's something else here. There's more to the story. So either way, Democrats have embraced this call for a probe and said, sure, we'll ask those questions. You heard Adam Schiff say so today, but they say the answers they get to these questions are actually going to help Democrats and hurt and embarrass the White House.
All right, a lot of attention will be focused on that on March 20th. Let me ask you, Margaret, late Tuesday, the drip of stories continued, adding to the Russia intrigue. One of them being that the president himself met with Russian Ambassador Kislyak during the campaign. How has the White House responded to that?
Well, statements issued by the deputy spokesperson here, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, has suggested that, this was just in a social setting. Grin and grab is what some people call it, just a quick handshake along the line of many, many, many introductions. So they've downplayed that there was any interaction. And frankly, there's nothing illegal about such an interaction, but it counters the very definitive claims that have been made consistently by the president and by this White House that there was absolutely no contact with Russian officials. So this is yet another example where there was contact. And it's not clear why President Trump has been so definitive in saying that there was no case of it, and that many who work for him have said they don't recall what have then been confirmed and reported interactions with Russian officials or Russians.
Finally, Margaret, I also want to ask you about the battle to shape the Obamacare replacement bill. The vice president said Tuesday that both he and the president, quote, believe that the American Health Care Act is the framework for reform and are open to improvements. Now it's Speaker Ryan's turn in the barrel. To what extent is the president expected to publicly sell this plan?
Well, it was interesting today that the White House put forward the Health and Human Services Secretary, Tom Price, to sell this and to explain it from the podium at the White House, because that signifies that the White House, to a degree, is not just supporting, but owning this proposal. But the rest of that has not been fleshed out, which Secretary Price said from the podium consistently, time and time again, when details were asked about this bill, whether certain questions were answered, to basically respond to some Republicans who said this doesn't meet their standards. Rand Paul among them. Actually, President Trump just tweeted saying he thinks he's confident he can convince those skeptical Republicans to sign on. And so at this point, Elaine, basically you have the White House half owning a half scripted proposal here, but saying either way it's going to be better than the existing Obamacare plans. And so this is really going to be something that House Republicans, Senate Republicans could pay the price for most immediately, because they faced down ballot elections in 2018. And regardless of your politics, if you are at home, unhappy with your health care that may influence how you vote. So that's why the White House is also keeping a little bit of distance here, saying don't call this Trump care just yet. This is a work in progress. This is a starting point. So basically they have part of a concept, they don't have the full package, and they're not ready to fully own it just yet. So I don't know how much President Trump will be out there campaigning for it, but tonight he at least is tweeting that he thinks he can win the political battle within his own party over it.
All right, Margaret Brennan at the White House for us. Margaret, thanks so much.